While the N64 and the PS1 saw the birth of the 3D platformer, it was really the next generation that saw its perfection. But as with any popular genre, you ended up with a lot of games that wanted a slice of that pie. New franchises were popping up all over the place, and one of the lesser remembered ones, despite the almost unbelievable number of sequels it got, was Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. And honestly, I was really surprised at how well it has held up. I was kind of expecting a relatively generic platformer without a lot of unique elements. To be sure, Ty isn't exactly a revolutionary game in any respect, but it juggles all the necessary elements while simultaneously managing to set itself apart. Now, it does this in the same way that a lot of platformers end up setting themselves apart, with their environments and characters. Ty was created by an Australian developer, and it really shows. Everything about the game is Australian through and through, which is a very unique thing. Pretty much every game that we play is either through a European, American, or Japanese perspective. There are, as always, some exceptions, but those games are often some of the most interesting games you'll play because they're approached so differently than the ones you're used to. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game is wholly unique. Its diverse cast of animal characters and different unique worlds feels very Spyro-esque, which is honestly a pretty positive thing. At this point in time, the Spyro games had already experienced a pretty severe decline in quality since Insomniac had stopped working on them, and Ty very much feels like a spiritual successor to those games, albeit one with its own unique atmosphere and flavor. But one thing that Ty hadn't quite figured out from other platformers was its camera. The camera can often be an absolute nightmare in this game, and that has somewhat of a domino effect. Because when the camera isn't cooperating, everything else goes to shit as well. Because a bad camera angle often interferes with both platforming and combat. Most of the time, when it comes to that gameplay, Ty does a pretty good job. It focuses more on long-range attacks, which was the popular approach at the time, though it doesn't drag in a veritable arsenal of weaponry, which was also very much in vogue, opting to use perhaps the most Australian of weapons, the boomerang. This does mean that there isn't as much combat variety as people were coming to expect, and that's probably the worst problem that Ty had at the time of its release: people's expectations. Because while the game's problems were relatively small, they were amplified, because Ty the Tasmanian Tiger kinda just came out at what was a bad time to be a second-tier platformer. While a good game, it was released right in the midst of a bunch of great games. Games like Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank. A mildly dated-feeling spiritual successor to Spyro just wasn't going to be all that appealing. Of course, these days, that feeling is exactly what makes it appealing, and so Ty still manages to hold its own, thanks in no small part to its unique settings and characters. Chrome did a fantastic job at differentiating themselves from the 3D platforming norm, while still conforming to it where it really mattered. Every Monday, I look at a game that's at least 10 years old, and see if it's held up. If it's still worth playing, now. If you like that idea, be sure to subscribe so you can see the latest videos. If you like this video in particular, be sure to hit that like button, and thanks for watching.